My parents gave my spoiled sister $1 million and told me to earn my own money. Then my grandfather said something that changed everything. I still remember the exact moment my world fell apart. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and the autumn leaves were falling outside our family home in Westchester County, New York. The crisp air carried the smell of coffee and my mother's expensive perfume. As I walked into the dining room for what I thought would be a normal family breakfast, my parents sat at the mahogany table, looking unusually serious. My sister Jessica was there too, practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. At 25, she still acted like a spoiled teenager, and our parents never seemed to mind. I was 28, had been working two jobs since college, and had finally saved enough money to consider buying my first apartment. "Sarah, sit down," my father said, his voice carrying that tone he used during his business meetings. "We need to discuss something important." My stomach dropped. Important family discussions in our house usually meant bad news for me and good news for Jessica. I pulled out the chair across from them, my hands already trembling slightly. "As you both know, your grandfather's trust fund has matured," my mother began, smoothing her perfectly styled blonde hair. "We've made some decisions about how to distribute the money." Jessica could barely contain herself. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, her blue eyes sparkling like diamonds. I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. "Jessica," my father continued, "we're giving you $1 million. This will help you start your interior design business and buy that condo in Manhattan you've been wanting." The words hit me like a physical blow. $1 million, just handed to her, like it was nothing. Jessica squealed with delight, jumping up to hug our parent. I sat there in stunned silence, watching this celebration unfold around me. "What about Sarah?" Jessica asked, suddenly remembering I existed. But there was something in her voice, a smugness that made my skin crawl. My mother looked at me with those cold gray eyes I'd grown to fear. "Sarah, you're older and more independent. You've always been the responsible one. It's time you learn to earn your own money, instead of depending on family handouts." The room spun around me. 28 years of being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything. 28 years of watching Jessica get everything she wanted while I worked multiple jobs just to pay for my own college tuition. "But Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I've been saving for years just to afford a down payment on a small apartment. Jessica has never even had a job." My father's face hardened. "That's exactly the problem, Sarah. You think small. Jessica thinks big. She has vision, creativity, ambition. You're content with mediocrity." Those words cut deeper than any knife could have. Mediocrity. That's what they thought of my hard work, my dedication, my years of sacrifice. "Besides," my mother added, straightening her pearl necklace, "Jessica needs the money more than you do. You're perfectly capable of making your own way in the world. You always have been." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. Not when they were already convinced I was the lesser daughter. "I see," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Well, congratulations, Jessica." Jessica at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Sarah, I'm sorry. Maybe when my business takes off, I can—" "Don't," I interrupted, standing up from the table. "Just don't." I walked out of that dining room and didn't look back. In my childhood bedroom, I sat on the edge of my twin bed and finally let the tears come. Silent, angry tears that felt like they were burning tracks down my cheeks. The unfairness of it all crushed down on me like a weight. Jessica had failed out of 2 colleges, lived at home rent-free for 7 years, and had never held a job for more than 3 months. I had graduated with honors, worked through college, and had been financially independent since I was 22. Yet she was the one getting rewarded. I called in sick to both my jobs that day. I couldn't face the world, couldn't pretend everything was fine. Instead, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough, why I never would be. The next few weeks were a blur of fake smiles and forced conversations. Jessica was everywhere, showing off her new designer handbags and talking about her Manhattan condo search. She hired a personal shopper, bought a brand new BMW, and started planning her design studio launch party. Meanwhile, I continued my routine of working at the marketing firm during the day and waitressing at night. My tiny studio apartment in Queens felt even smaller now, especially when I compared it to the luxury Jessica was swimming in. But the first real twist came 3 weeks later, when I ran into my old college friend Monica at a coffee shop in Midtown. Monica worked in interior design, and when I mentioned Jessica's new business venture, her face went pale. "Sarah," she said, leaning across the small table, "I need to tell you something. Jessica approached my firm last month, asking if we needed investors. She doesn't know the first thing about interior design. She couldn't even identify basic design principles when we met with her." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? She's not starting a business. She's living off that money, pretending to be an entrepreneur." I heard from another friend that she's been telling people she's a successful interior designer, but she's never actually taken on a single client. That night, I confronted Jessica in our parents' house. I found her in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags from Bergdorf Goodman and Tiffany & Co. "Having fun spending your business investment?" I asked, sarcasm dripping from every word. Jessica's face went red. "I don't know what you mean. I talked to Monica Rodriguez. You know, the actual interior designer? She told me about your little meeting." Jessica's composure cracked. "Look, Sarah, I'm still figuring things out. Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome wasn't built with shopping sprees either." I shot back. "You're wasting that money, and we both know it. At least I'm not bitter and jealous like you," Jessica snapped. "Maybe if you weren't so negative all the time, Mom and Dad would trust you with money too." The accusation hit me like a slap. Bitter and jealous. Maybe I was. Maybe that's all I'd ever be in this family. But the second twist came when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I called my grandfather direct. Grandpa Frank lived in a retirement community in Florida, but he was still sharp as a tack at 86. He'd built the family construction business from nothing, starting with a single truck and ending up with a company worth millions. I'd always admired him, but our family rarely talked about him anymore. "Sarah," his voice boomed through the phone. "What a lovely surprise. How's my hard-working granddaughter?" Hearing those words, hard-working granddaughter, made me start crying again. When I finally managed to explain what had happened, the silence on the other end of the phone stretched for what felt like hours. "Let me understand this correctly," Grandpa Frank finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your parents gave Jessica $1 million to start a business she knows nothing about, and told you to earn your own money because you're too responsible. That's about the size of it," I said, wiping my nose with a tissue. Another long silence. Then, "Sarah, I need you to come visit me this weekend. Can you do that?" I'd never heard my grandfather sound so serious. "Of course, Grandpa. Is everything okay?" "Everything's about to be," he said in a way that sent shivers down my spine. That Friday, I took a personal day and flew to Tampa. The retirement community was beautiful, with palm trees and manicured lawns that reminded me of a resort. Grandpa Frank was waiting for me in the lobby, looking distinguished in his navy blazer despite using a walking cane. "You look just like your grandmother," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like aftershave and peppermint. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." We had dinner at his favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where the owner knew him by name. Over pasta and wine, I told him everything. Not just about the money, but about years of feeling invisible, overlooked, like I was never quite good enough. "Your parents," he said finally, cutting his chicken with precise movements, "have forgotten what real character looks like. They've confused flashiness with substance, neediness with worthiness." The third twist came when he told me something that made my jaw drop. "Sarah, that trust fund they distributed, it wasn't the only money I set aside for you girls." I looked up from my food. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been watching this family for years, and I've seen how they treat you versus how they treat Jessica. So I made separate arrangements. Private arrangements." My heart started pounding. "Grandpa, what are you saying?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "I'm saying that sometimes good people have to wait longer for their rewards, but the wait makes the reward that much sweeter." Inside the envelope was a bank statement. My name was on the account, and the balance made me dizzy. $2.5 million. More than double what Jessica had received. Grandpa, I can't accept this, I stammered, but he held up his hand. You're not accepting anything. You're inheriting what you've already earned through years of hard work, integrity, and perseverance. This money has been sitting in that account for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. I was crying again, but these tears felt different. Cleaner somehow. There's more, he continued. I've also been in touch with my lawyer about something else. Something bigger. The fourth twist came the next morning. Over breakfast in his apartment. Grandpa Frank had always been an early riser, and I found him reading the newspaper at his small dining table, as the Florida sunshine streamed through his windows. Sarah, he said, folding the paper carefully, I want to tell you about my construction company. I knew the basics. Frank Morrison Construction had been hugely successful until he sold it 5 years ago to a large corporation. Or at least, that's what I thought had happened. I didn't actually sell the company, he said, watching my face carefully. I restructured it. The corporation I sold to, it's a shell company I own. The real ownership of Frank Morrison Construction has been held in trust, waiting for the right person to take it over. My coffee cup clattered against the saucer. Grandpa, what are you saying? I'm saying the company is yours, Sarah. It always has been. You just didn't know it yet. The room started spinning. Mine? But I don't know anything about construction. He laughed. A sound like gravel and honey. You think I knew anything about construction when I started with one truck and a dream? You learn by doing, by surrounding yourself with good people, by making smart decisions. All things you've already proven you can do. The fifth twist came when he explained the real reason behind this revelation. Your father was supposed to inherit the company, Grandpa Frank said, his voice getting harder. But over the years, I watched him become someone I didn't recognize. Soft, entitled, making decisions based on status instead of merit. When I saw how he and your mother treated you, versus Jessica, I knew he couldn't be trusted with something I'd spent my life building. I felt like I was in a dream. Does he know? He knows I sold the company. He doesn't know to whom, and he's about to find out, along with the rest of the family, exactly what real consequences look like. We spent the rest of the weekend going over business documents, meeting with his lawyer, and planning what came next. Frank Morrison Construction was currently being run by a management team, but it needed an owner who would be hands-on, someone who understood the value of hard work. The company is profitable, Grandpa Frank explained, as we walked through his neighborhood. $22 million in annual revenue, contracts with 3 major development firms, and a reputation built over 40 years. It's not just a business, Sarah. It's a legacy. By Sunday night, when I flew back to New York, my entire world had changed. But I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. Grandpa Frank had made me promise to wait one more week, to let him handle some final legal details. That week was the longest of my life. I went through the motions at my jobs, nodded along when Jessica showed me pictures of her new condo, and smiled politely when my parents talked about their upcoming trip to Europe. But inside, I felt like I was carrying a secret that could change everything. The sixth and final twist came the following Saturday, when Grandpa Frank arrived in New York unannounced. I was working my weekend shift at the restaurant when my phone buzzed with a text. Family meeting at the house. 2 p.m. Be there. Grandpa Frank. When I arrived at my parents' house in Westchester, I found my grandfather sitting in my father's favorite armchair, like he owned the place. Which, I was beginning to realize, he basically did. My parents and Jessica were arranged on the couch, looking confused and slightly nervous. Thank you all for gathering, Grandpa Frank said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd run boardrooms for decades. I have some announcements to make. My father cleared his throat. Dad, if this is about the trust fund distribution, we've already shut up, Richard, Grandpa Frank said quietly, and my father's mouth snapped closed like a trap. I'd never heard anyone speak to my father like that, and the shock of it was almost funny. First, my grandfather continued, I want to discuss Jessica's interior design business. How's that going, sweetheart? Jessica shifted uncomfortably. It's still in the development phase, Grandpa. Development phase. I see. How many clients have you taken on during this development phase? Well, I'm still building my portfolio. And the answer is zero, Grandpa Frank said, pulling out a folder from his briefcase. Zero clients, zero projects, zero business activities of any kind, but plenty of shopping receipts. $43,000 in luxury goods in 6 weeks, to be exact. My parents looked stunned. Jessica went pale. But that's fine, my grandfather continued conversationally. Young people deserve to enjoy themselves. However, I do think it's important that we discuss the consequences of financial irresponsibility. He turned to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my pulse quicken. Sarah, would you like to tell your family about our conversation last weekend? This was the moment everything changed. I stood up, my legs shaking but my voice steady. Grandpa Frank has given me $2.5 million, I said, watching their faces. And he's also given me Frank Morrison, construction. The silence in the room was deafening. My father's face went through about 6 different shades of red. That's impossible, my mother whispered. The company was sold years ago. No, Grandpa Frank said, standing up with the help of his cane. The company was transferred to Sarah, along with all assets, contracts, and future earnings. As of Monday morning, she will be the official CEO and owner of Frank Morrison Construction. My father exploded. You can't do this. I'm your son. The business should come to me. The business goes to the person who deserves it, my grandfather replied calmly. The person who understands the value of hard work, integrity, and making smart decisions. That person is Sarah. Jessica was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. But what about my money? What about my business? Your money is gone, Jessica. Spent on handbags and jewelry. As for your business, Grandpa Frank shrugged. There never was a business. My mother found her voice. Frank, you can't do this to our family. We've always supported you. Always. Always. What, Margaret? Always ignored your older daughter while spoiling the younger one. Always taught Jessica that she deserves things without earning them. Always made Sarah feel like she wasn't good enough despite being twice the person any of you are. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. I felt vindicated in a way I'd never experienced before. Someone had finally seen me, really seen me, and found me worthy. This is insane, my father said, pacing around the living room. Sarah doesn't know anything about running a construction company. She'll learn, Grandpa Frank replied, just like I did, just like every successful person does, through hard work, dedication, and surrounding herself with good people. All qualities Sarah has in abundance. And you seem to lack entirely. He turned to me and smiled. Sarah, your new life starts Monday. I've arranged for you to meet with the management team, and I'll be staying in New York for 2 weeks to help with the transition. After that, the company is entirely yours. I wanted to cry, to laugh, to scream with joy. Instead, I walked over and hugged my grandfather. Thank you, I whispered against his shoulder. Not just for the money or the company, thank you for seeing me. I've always seen you, sweetheart, he whispered back. I was just waiting for the right moment to make sure everyone else did too. As we prepared to leave, my father made one last desperate attempt. Sarah, you can't seriously be considering this. You'll fail within a year. You'll lose everything and embarrass the family name. I turned to look at him, this man who had raised me but never really known me, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Pity. Dad, I said quietly. I've been failing to meet your expectations my entire life, but I've never failed at anything that actually mattered. I won't start now. 6 months later, I was sitting in my corner office on the 20th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, looking out at the city skyline. Frank Morrison Construction had just landed its biggest contract ever, a $50 million residential development in Brooklyn. My team respected me, my clients trusted me, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Jessica had moved back in with my parents after burning through her inheritance. My parents had stopped speaking to Grandpa Frank and me, but that felt more like a blessing than a curse. Sometimes the most loving thing a family can do is let you go. I still worked hard, harder than ever actually. But now it was work that mattered, work that built something lasting. work that honored the legacy my grandfather had entrusted to me. And every morning when I walked into that office, I remembered his words. Sometimes good people have to wait longer for their reward, but the wait makes the reward that much sweeter. He was right. It was the sweetest victory I'd ever tasted. The phone on my desk buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Morrison, your grandfather is here to see you. He still visited every few weeks, checking on the business, offering advice, and reminding me that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Send him in, I said, straightening my jacket and preparing to show him the quarterly reports that would prove, once again, that he'd made the right choice. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it finally comes, it changes everything.